My podcast is called Sarah in Tech. Usually, it's about how you got into tech, but you're one of the first people I get to ask how you also got out of tech too. So, to start with, how did you get into tech? Like, what was your did you try something else and then eventually find your way into being a PM when I finally met you?
Yeah, really good question. It was very much a happy accident when I was a senior at Georgetown. I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do. I had tried going down the finance and consulting route, which is very typical of folks at my school, but it just really didn't resonate with me. And so when I was feeling a little bit stuck, I ended up chatting with a mentor of mine, and he just recommended I look into a few rotational programs. And so I did, and Dropbox was one of the ones I applied to. And it was the only job that I got. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm just moving and packing up my things, moving from the DC area to California, which is not something I'd ever foreseen for myself. And yeah, that's very much how I got into tech, a happy accident.
So you started at Dropbox. What were you doing at Dropbox and what did you study in school?
Yeah, so I studied international affairs. When I first got into Georgetown, I had this dream of becoming the US ambassador to China. But then when I started taking some policy courses, I realized that was very much not me. And for the longest time, I'd honestly wish I switched to the business school, but stuck with international affairs and graduated with a degree in culture and politics. But at Dropbox specifically, I actually got into their rotational program. So I spent the first year doing two 6-month rotations where I worked in strategic partnerships for my first rotation. So think like working with companies like, Google or HP, preloading Dropbox to improve kind of new customer sign-ons and conversions. And then my second rotation, I worked on the financial planning analysis team because I figured it'd be a great opportunity to kind of get those financial skills under my tool belt.
That sounds like really actually relevant to the degree. Even though you weren't working.
Somewhat.
I mean, the politics in tech are pretty crazy sometimes, so that does sound really relevant. How did you end up becoming a PM? I know it's kind of like a really big deal right now, like, everyone's wanting to get into PM or being a PM, a project manager or, what's the other acronym that also
Product
product
man
manager.
yes, yes. Yeah, that's a really great question. It starts, I guess, continuing my journey at Dropbox. So after I finished my 1-year rotational program, I decided to join their business strategy team, which is essentially internal consulting. So I think it's kind of funny how I like avoided going down that path in college, but somehow found my way to those roles because I realized both of those roles, it just provides me with like a really interesting, unique perspective that gives me like a just like a high level view of not only like the business and the different functions, but allows me to like dive deep within each of the teams and understand like, what are the metrics? What does it mean to work closely with senior stakeholders to identify like what problems we're trying to solve and what are the right like frameworks and strategies to go about that. So when after I'd been on the strategy team for about, I guess like a year or so, I realized I was looking for something more dynamic as much as I enjoyed, chatting with senior leaders and helping them unpack and understand like what are their biggest problems and what strategy they want to apply to specific problems, I realized I really wanted to execute and I really wanted to get my hands dirty. And I felt like product would be the perfect role for me, but honestly, I didn't know how to get in. I was a little bit stuck. I felt like honestly getting in within Dropbox was quite challenging just because I didn't really have the skill sets, even though people say like it's sometimes easier to make the internal transition. So very much started looking externally. And interestingly enough, I ended up seeing someone post on a Georgetown alumni Facebook group that Rev was looking for a product manager. So I ended up reaching out to a product manager there, having a conversation, and one thing led to another. I got an interview, I did well, and I got my first and only ever product manager job. So that's how I ended up at Rev and ended up meeting you.
And you also ended up, like, being the head PM, didn't you? For a while there? Weren't you in charge of all of the PMs, not just one,
Oh
like,
gosh.
vertical or one like, part of a vertical? You were, like, over all of it, and you were running everything, and I could only imagine, like, the amount of stress because I had my own like, I was in charge of all of the data science, but,
Yeah.
like, the whole company, like, you were the head PM.
I was one of the senior product managers overseeing the Rev organization, the marketplace organization within Rev, but I reported to the head of product at the time. But it was still, yeah, quite a lot of responsibility. I wasn't necessarily expecting that managerial role so soon, but as you know, you probably witnessed as well, there's just a lot of kind of transition with folks kind of leaving either to go on sabbatical or just pursue other parts of their professional career. So it ended up being something that was very much, like, flung upon me that I graciously accepted, but then realized it was a lot of responsibility. It was a lot of responsibility.
I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, but at one point in time, I think every single PM except one quit in the
I'd heard
entire
of that.
organization. So, at least that I was aware of and was told to me verbally. So, I'm not
Mhm.
quite sure what occurred behind the scenes. I can talk to data science and what was going on in data science, but it sounded very difficult to say the least and very stressful.
Yeah.
So here's the fun question. How did you leave tech? How did you make that big decision to leave the jump off the ship?
That's a really good question and quite nuanced. I know I've shared some of it on LinkedIn, but it very much does not start at all with tech and very much starts with my personal life, which I'm very willing to share. So it started with like me realizing that the 6-year relationship that I was in was no longer serving me. I'd been in a relationship for, about 6 years. We'd gotten engaged to be married, and in a lot of ways, I think to other people looking from the outside in, it seemed like I had the perfect life. I had a high-paying job, I was engaged, we had just bought a house in the Bay Area, so very much like settling into suburban life. We lived on a cul-de-sac. Like that is I feel like that's about as suburban as it gets, like cul-de-sac, backyard, like, the whole 9 yards. And
And I just had
it
it
took me
recently explained to me that like in San Francisco, it's not normal to like get engaged, to get married, to be in like a committed relationship. Or well, it is normal to be in a committed
Mhm.
relationship, but you just don't get married. You just like live together indefinitely.
That's very
Like
possible too.
I, like, was talking to a gentleman in San Francisco, and he was like, "Yes, I have a girlfriend. She takes care of me emotionally. We've been together 6 years." And he had no intention of, like, progressing it beyond that. I'm like, "And she doesn't work, and he just takes care of her, and that's that." I just the culture is
Gotcha.
very different in San Francisco. So
Yeah, it is very different, and I feel like in a lot of ways, like, I was, like, ahead of the curve. Like, I had gotten engaged, I think around 25, broke off my engagement around like 27. And it was really breaking off the engagement where I felt like this massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders because this had been a decision that had been weighing on me for, I want to say, the better part of 8 to 12 months, trying to decide whether or not this is the person I want to move forward with. And there's a lot of fears holding me back from making the decision sooner around, the fact that I had invested so much in this relationship. We had gotten to know each other so well. We had bought a house together. We had planned to move to Colorado and like have kids, take our kids skiing. There's so much for us to look forward to that I was so scared to contemplate what, you know, what else could be out there aside from what I had known. This idea of like we are more drawn and more comfortable with what is known versus like what is unknown. So after that kind of massive storm cloud lifted, that was when I could finally kind of assess my relationship to my job. And during COVID, like many folks that you probably know, I just threw myself into work. I didn't really know what else to do. Like, I was like, okay, I can't really do the things I really enjoy. I might as well just give 110% of myself to my job. And without my relationship weighing me down, I just realized that wasn't sustainable and just didn't feel like me. I feel like in a lot of ways, when I was a product manager at Rev, I became less of myself and more of what I thought other people wanted of me. And what I mean by that is I feel like I became a lot tougher. I lean more into like my masculine side. I feel like I pushed a lot. I felt like I tried to force people to respect me. I think I'm pretty sure I like spoke louder. I probably projected more because I thought I needed to be more like a man to take up space. So, I once I had that chance to really reflect on whether or not I felt like myself and whether or not I felt like this job was serving me, the clear answer was like no. Like, this I only follow this path because I thought this is what you need to do to succeed. I thought you needed to go to a good school, work for a good job, get to a good company, climb the career ladder, and then one day I would be happy. But I just realized, like, I don't think this is for me. I don't like I genuinely wasn't happy, but I thought I was because I was just following the script that everyone else followed. But I think once I had a chance to ask myself, is this really for me? Do I feel like myself? The answer was no.
Were you experiencing, like, any burnout because you threw yourself so hard into work
Yeah,
and,
I
like,
really
mild
was.
panic attacks or anything like that? Like, I yeah.
It broke down a bunch of times. I just number of hours I spent working probably wasn't that much. Like, probably per week, I was probably working between 50 and 60 hours per week. But then after work, I was thinking about work constantly. I still remember that I would go to bed reading first round review articles on like how to be a better product manager. What are like the top 10 skills you need to excel as like a people manager? And it just wasn't healthy because it felt like almost every moment that I wasn't working, I was thinking about work. And I feel like it was really that more so than the work itself. Like actually like on Zoom, that was burning me out.
And it's always important to step back and take a break.
Mhm.
One of my friends was teasing me because I have all my computers are set up on a timer and they all shut off at 8:30. Doesn't
I
matter
love
what I'm
that.
working on, but, like, you're done at 8:30. I don't care what you're doing.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I feel like that was a boundary I didn't learn to set until, like, I quit my job, and I just realized, like, I need a very this is, like, a very hard boundary that I'm setting, that I'm leaving tech for an indefinite period of time because I know I need to heal. Like, I know I need to work on myself.
And someone, again, in San Francisco was explaining to me that, like, it's kind of normal to go through that process of, like, taking a break from work for a couple months and self-examining if you're enjoying what you're doing, if it's serving you, and, like, give yourself that space and finding yourself. And do you wanna talk a little bit about that journey? Because
Yeah,
as
definitely.
someone who's not, like, super familiar with San Francisco, and I'm sure a lot of people that listen to this aren't that familiar with San Francisco about the culture there, it's very interesting and probably quite a bit healthy.
Yeah, I think one comment I did wanna make on what you said is, even though I knew it was, like, somewhat common within tech and, like, San Francisco specifically to take sabbaticals, I still noticed a lot of fear when it came to making that decision because I felt like I was supposed to keep working. I
Mhm.
felt like I was, if I didn't keep working, then I would be a failure. And that if I didn't have a job, then I would be like the most boring person out there. But then I realized in a lot of ways, like not having a job made me incredibly interesting because it allowed me to cultivate and follow my curiosities wherever they took me. And frankly, like a lot of them took me outside of tech and like into like community and like spirituality. But I guess in terms of like my sabbatical journey, the high level summary is I went a lot more inward than I thought. I really started my sabbatical with this overarching question of what does it mean to live a life that's personally meaningful and fulfilling? And I've unpacked it in a lot of different ways, reflected on it very deeply. And the answer I kept returning to and I feel like really resonates deeply with like my heart and soul now is that what makes life personally meaningful and fulfilling for me is to just simply be myself, but be like all of myself and be accepting and appreciative of like my imperfections and be very true to who I am in leading with that and daring to talk about the things and share stories that I know a lot of people are thinking about, but they somehow feel like it's not professional enough, right? or like not appropriate enough to kind of share it more publicly.
I think, like, anyone who denies that their personal life is a big impact on their job or that they're tied together in some way is, like, really denying a large part of themselves. You can't just, like, throw up a wall and be like, "Personal life over there, work life over here." Completely separate, not related, like, no intermingling at all, like, it definitely is impactful on both sides, like, what happens at work comes home with you, and what,
Mhm.
happens at home follows you to work as much as you try not to let it, and they're very much so intertwined because you are one human.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree, and I feel like part of my journey was exactly that. It was about breaking down those walls and realizing that to become who I am and loving all of myself, it is a matter of, like, integrating all parts of ourselves and remembering and reminding ourselves that, like, we do bring our work life home, and we do bring our home life to work. And I still remember I connected with an old coworker from Rev recently. She told me how she remembers that at work, I just seemed so, like, truly walled off, like, she couldn't get through it all, and that's because, like, I felt like I needed to protect my image. Like, I felt like if I shared more than an appropriate amount about my personal life, like, aside from, I went to the farmer's market on Sunday. I gardened, like, I wouldn't necessarily be respected, but I've realized through my sabbatical and connecting with people and leading from a place of vulnerability that the more that I share my story and the more that I share my imperfections and my challenges, the more that people are willing to, like, let down their guard and, like, trust that I have their best interests at heart.
As well as the fact probably share some parts of themselves because anyone who says, like,
Mhm.
their life is perfect, all they did was go to the farmer's market this weekend and garden, like, I have questions for them. Are they a robot? Like, everyone behind the scenes has stuff going on, and one thing that, comes up a lot in my life is, like, family, like, family's not
Mhm.
perfect. Anyone who's like, "Oh, yeah, my relationship with my family is perfect, and I love Christmas and Thanksgiving," and, like, everyone's family has something going on. They have a black sheep or they have something weird, and it's normal to have that happen. We're all imperfect. We all have
Mhm.
something going on like that that we're struggling with. I don't think there's anyone who has it all together, and if someone's pretending to have it all together, I feel like it shows, like, usually behind the scenes, it's a bigger mess sometimes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
I feel like
being
it ends up, like, slipping through the cracks, and I really feel like, during COVID when I was, working really hard, but then also, frankly, like, in denial about the fact that this relationship wasn't serving the either of us, I still remember my mom would call me and ask me how I was doing, and all I would say was, "I'm fine. You don't need to worry about me. I'm fine." I'm fine. But actually, I was not fine, but I didn't consciously know that because even though, like, I've had a meditation practice since probably 2016 or so, I was otherwise, like, filling my day with activity. Like, I was using activity as a means to escape. And it's just ironic because the forms of activity that I had were in a lot of ways people would say, like, productive, right? Like, I would exercise, I would, cook healthy meals, I would garden, but then I would also, instead of, like, just focusing on exercise, I would listen to podcasts at the same time. And I cannot for the life of me tell you anything that I learned from my podcast while I was working out at the same time. So there's a lot of meditation as a means to feel that I was being reflective and to make me feel better about taking that time for myself. But was I actually taking the time that I needed to reflect and really look at these deep, dark, shadowy parts of myself that I was in denial about? No.
and I think, like, it's kind of a cultural thing, like, we're always rushing off to go do the next
Mhm.
thing, be the next thing, try to self-improve instead of just, like, being quiet and being with ourselves, like, we're always listening to music, even if we're shopping or, and it doesn't really allow you to be alone with your own thoughts. I know a lot of friends of mine also meditate. I don't, I probably should, but someone pointed out that I'm a little weird because when I drive, I don't turn the music on. I'm just, like, deep
Mm.
in thought which might not be good for the other drivers, but it's Like, being self-reflective and thinking about what's going on is really important, but as a culture, we don't do it, and being alone with ourselves and being comfortable with being alone with ourselves is an important skill.
Mhm. Yeah, I totally agree, and I'm just reminded of a quote I read, I believe it's from Oprah recently, she's a lovely woman, but it said that there's no doing without being, you know? There's this idea that, like, we need to feel comfortable with who we are, we need to be comfortable sitting with our own thoughts so that we can understand ourselves deeply, and from there, take intentional action and steps to create the life that we want. And I think about how during my sabbatical, I really learned to embrace the stillness and silence, even though it was so hard because I'm just such a doer. Like, something that I've found a lot of solace in is exploring astrology. And for me, like, my sun sign is Aries, which is a fire sign. So we're very much known for being like doers, for taking charge, for paving the way. And I just realized actually I need to take a moment to just simply be and try to understand, like, and unpack who I am so that when I'm ready to take action, right? I can take action from a place that's very much grounded and rooted in my truth. And one of the things I ended up doing was exploring these moments of silence. So, like, instead of turning on music, I would just pay attention to and just fully focus on the drive and just like notice what thoughts came up. And I think it's so healthy. And I think it's so great that you have that, because in a lot of ways, like, that is a form of meditation.
I mean, I think as a society, we need to be more reflective on our actions and think about how they impact all the other people, especially with like social media polarizing us so much with a lot of different
Mhm.
thoughts and ideas. And being reflective allows you to like think about how that impact, like how what you do and how what other people do impacts each other. Because I know, like, on the internet and all of these crazy things, it's not so common on LinkedIn, but on other social media sites, you definitely like run into trolls or people that will like be aggressively rude. And it's just like pretty sure they don't like themselves is the thing. And they don't spend time alone with their own thoughts. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't do that because then they would possess some level of empathy, I would hope. And it's
Mhm.
just like as a society, it's just like need to unplug and be alone with ourselves. So that way we possess some empathy. And my friends and I, we've been talking a lot about being able, like, it doesn't exist right now, but being able to in the same way there's like antidepressants and things like that, taking a pill to force you to have empathy. Like if there was a
Mhm.
pill and you were being a jerk, you would have to take an empathic, like a pill to make you more empathetic to those around you and how what you do and it forces you to not be walled off, if you will. Um, and what do you think about that crazy idea of a pill that forces you to have more empathy?
I think the world needs more empathy. I think the more that we can, like, assume positive intent, to lead with an open heart, and to approach every person from a place of curiosity and believe that everyone has, like, this beautiful story to tell, then I genuinely think the world would be a better place. And even going back to your comment on trolls, I still remember my very first comment, like, my very first negative comment on LinkedIn.
What?
And
Oh no.
yeah, like, frankly, how much it hurt, not just because of what the comment said, but because of the person that it came from and what this person had done to me in the past in a way that I guess I won't share too many details here. But I don't know, it's just going back to this idea of empathy, right? I almost feel like he, like, forgot the potential trauma that he probably, like, inflicted on me in the past, and to respond from a place of reactivity and anger to me sharing my story of how, like, ayahuasca has positively benefited me. It seemed to have triggered him in a certain way. And, it can be really challenging in those moments to have empathy. But I think the more that we can, sometimes, like, take a step back, take some deep breaths and remind ourselves that like, we're all trying to do our best here, and, we're all trying to not get triggered, but, like, we oftentimes do, and the best thing we can do when, people say inflammatory things or things that hurt us is to treat them with kindness and respect, even if, a lot of people say, like, they don't deserve it.
And I know, like, when people go out and troll and try to intentionally inflict pain or a reaction, it's really hard to do that because you always like the gut comes up and you're just like, oh, I want to like, you want to tell them like, hey, like be nice, but like, you can't.
Right.
My high school bully actually tried to befriend me or send me a friend request recently. I can't
Mm.
say I reacted out of kindness. I blocked them.
Mm.
But and I don't think that was wrong, but I don't think they changed. So
Mhm.
kudos to you to like that's hard. I actually wrote papers in college under my bio degree about ayahuasca, and I've been aware of ayahuasca
Mhm.
for several decades now. It's one of the few drugs that I really want to like go do and do it
Yeah.
right. I hear like the experiences on that, like, it lets you know what you're supposed to be doing with your life, and you have such an
Mhm.
experience that is so much bigger than yourself, and when I wrote the paper, I, like, wrote all the chemical pathways because it was a biology paper too, and,
Yeah.
but can are you comfortable talking more about that experience?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. First of all, I had no idea you already had like a scientific understanding of ayahuasca because I cannot say that I have a similar degree of expertise, but very much like my expertise is my experience. So I've done ayahuasca a total of 8 times across 2 years, 2017 and 2022. And I'm happy to kind of dive into both and or kind of one of those kind of experiences more in more detail, but overall, it is one of the most powerful plant medicines I've ever worked with. And it just, like, a lot of the experiences that I've had, it's impossible to summarize succinctly in words. But a few things I will say are that it allows you to access parts of your subconscious that you would not be able to otherwise. I compare it to kind of unlocking this door, like, in the depths of your subconscious and allowing you to kind of inviting you to, like, walk through and complete that part of your healing journey, because in a lot of ways, like, I've explored alternative healing modalities, like, talk therapy is one that, like, everyone talks about, right? Like, oh, everyone talks about how, like, you should go to therapy. I don't date people who don't go to therapy. But I think what I realized for me was that, yes, talking's effective, but talking really only addresses what is known, like the known quantities. And like, what if I want to go address those unknown unknowns? And I think that's where plant medicines like ayahuasca, like psilocybin, are so effective and why they've been proven so effective in like treatment resistant depression and anxiety, because it completely allows you to kind of just disassociate from your ego and see things in a totally different light.
Have you seen any of the research about ketamine and its use with,
I
like,
have seen some of it.
Re
Mhm.
helping treat, depression and anxiety again, but even, like, one of the things it does is even if you take meds and stuff like that, that it isn't really impacting, the negative side effects anymore, that ketamine actually will help you get back to a regular life where you're not depressed or you functioning in anxiety. It's
Mhm.
really intriguing. It's legal in some states and illegal in some states, but I guess that's the same with psilocybin. I don't know about the legality about ayahuasca, but I'm I just from like biology, I know like it's mostly from like the rainforest in the Amazon, is where it was natively done, but I don't know about doing it outside of that.
Yeah, I've only ever done it in Iquitos in Peru in the Amazon,
Mhm.
and it's incredibly powerful. It's done in a very it's administered in a ceremonial capacity. So you work with curanderos, they're healers, as well as facilitators in the cover of darkness because it's known as like a kind of a medicine to kind of consume in the dark because I think there's something about consuming in the dark that allows you to go more inward, to be reflective. And the medicine is considered like feminine. She's a grandmother and she's very much like your teacher. She's your teacher on this journey only if you accept this journey, right? And only if you're able to and willing to surrender to whatever she shows you.
I mean, I think one of the things I distinctively remember is that everyone who does ayahuasca comes into contact with a feminine entity and that teaches them something, whether it's like a grandmother or mother or, like a sister
Mhm.
in that capacity. It's kind of different for each person, but that they do you almost always. And that's kind of the idea behind why we have Mother Earth, if you will, is because of that. But that's my
Mhm.
understanding from inexperience.
I mean, I think that's a lovely understanding already. And I think something else that it does that I believe may be drawn from Michael Pollan's book, but there's something so beautiful about ayahuasca and psilocybin in that when you consume them, when you partner with them in a very intentional way. And what I mean by that is you come in with a specific kind of intention to heal or be open to certain perspectives or wisdom, then it's very comparable to like this fresh layer of snow being kind of blanketed onto like your mind. And in that moment, allowing you, I guess, after the experience to create new neural pathways, to create new things that like wire together. So kind of you're able to rewire any sort of like thoughts, negative thoughts or belief patterns that were holding you back from the person that you truly intend to be.
And it changes the way that you think,
Mhm.
and that's the same for I know the street name is Molly, I can't remember.
MDMA. Mhm.
Yeah, but it doesn't make you make new pathways, it just takes pathways that already exist and deepens them. So if
Mhm.
you are with people when you're on MDMA, you feel closer than you actually are, from that experience. I am so green, I've never done any of these things that I'm actually talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I've only ever done MDMA in a music festival scene, and I still do remember how close I did feel with others, but then how after, like, the peak, I still remember after kind of rolling particularly hard, I ended up breaking down and crying in tears, like, I can't exactly remember what I was crying about, but I think I was feeling some sort of way because I think at the time my partner and I were about to part ways. I was about to move to San Francisco. He was about to move from the DC area up to Boston. So there's some amount of like grieving the end of, this time that we had together. And this may be potentially like, yeah, this time that we had together.
I know, it was originally created as, like, a marriage therapy, that if you were having problems in your marriage, they would tell you to, like, send the kids away, lock yourself in your room with your husband, and take this pill, and then everything will be better. That's literally what it was created. Now everyone usually does it as a at the festival, and you feel really close with your friends afterwards or
Mhm.
during, but yeah, the original reason, or at least one of the reasons it was used in the 70s, though, was to treat marriages that were breaking down. So
Yeah.
interestingly enough. So yeah.
I mean, it is really interesting. And I think I'm seeing that there's just like this wave now of people consuming like MDMA, LSD, ketamine, psilocybin, ayahuasca in a very much more like intentional setting for the purposes of introspection, personal growth, and healing. And also, I recently learned that when cannabis is consumed as an edible, it actually has mild psychedelic effects. So, if you're interested in exploring psychedelics for personal healing, but you're daunted by the idea of like sourcing psilocybin or like going to retreat, cannabis is one really easy like gateway, right? Or doorway because it's not only very easily accessible and legal in most states now, but it's, it's a relatively known quantity for a lot of people compared to other things.
The thing that makes me hesitant about a lot of these things is that outside of, like, going to a doctor and getting a pill, like, you don't know 100% sure what it is if someone hands you something at a festival that you're consuming. That's the big like part that scares me, but, like, I know in Orange County, you can, like, walk into certain stores and they'll have psilocybin chocolate bars, and it has the dosage very clearly marked on it,
Mm.
and, that feels safe. It's, like, in a store with, like, a dosing on it and everything, but, like, on the other hand, like, going out mushroom picking, grabbing the wrong mushroom, and having a very bad experience. My aunt is a mushroom hunter, that's what she likes to do, she goes out into nature and actually hunts mushrooms.
Mhm.
I think it's just for normal consumption, but I haven't asked
You
my
never
aunt.
know. Maybe she's also against some psilocybin mushrooms as well. I mean, I remember early during my sabbatical, I also joined a local mushroom foraging and hunting group. And I never became an expert at like the identification, but I know it's very much like possible to forage for psilocybin mushrooms, but obviously have to be very much cautious of not consuming the wrong things.
Well, she's been doing it for well over a decade, so I think she might be in the expert
She
category.
knows. Yeah.
But I guess I'm not gonna ask my family member if they they go out and pick, magic
Maybe not.
mushrooms, but maybe I'll save that conversation with her for another day.
Mhm.
So I know you say that you're, like, in a sabbatical right now, but how long is your intention of being there? Are you just, like, content, and are you gonna stay in, like, this sabbatical mode? Are you kind of looking for the next thing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say I ended my like my traditional sabbatical in January. But before that time, I want to say around like the 9-month mark, I very seriously considered going back into tech, specifically product management. And I think it's really interesting, especially when you're on sabbatical. I found this just connecting with other folks on sabbatical. That's very common at these like mile markers, right? Like the 3, 6, 9, 12-month mark to feel like you need to have made certain progress. Like I still remember going in thinking that I'd probably be done at the 6-month mark. I'd probably have a job at the 9-month mark and I'd probably start that job by the 12-month mark. But that is absolutely not how it worked. I still remember around like August, September, I was looking at PM jobs on LinkedIn and I was I knew I had the skills to succeed. I was a senior product manager. I had, shipped a bunch of products as an IC and had experience now as a people manager. But every single time I would look at job descriptions on LinkedIn for PM jobs, my heart would sink. And I initially ignored it. I was like, oh, maybe it's because it's not the right job. Maybe or not the right company. Maybe it's because I now understand and want to prioritize my life outside of work. So I want to make sure that's very much like a 9 to 5, so therefore likely a larger company, series D plus or potentially like post IPO. So I kept trying to adjust my filters and trying to figure out, okay, it's probably still that I want to go back to PM, but it's probably not the right fit in terms of company, team size, product that I would be managing. But honestly, I was in denial because my heart told me that it wasn't a good fit. But because it was a known quantity because I knew it was a job that would get me 6 plus figures, like a 6 plus figure salary, plus options or stock,
Mhm.
plus the stability, plus great health insurance. I felt like I couldn't not consider it. But by the time January rolled around, and interestingly enough, I was in San Francisco visiting some friends, and I was at a friend's house party, and I actually reconnected with some product managers from Rev. I actually realized as much as I love that job for them, I didn't want that job for me. Like, I felt no jealousy. I felt so much happiness for them and excitement for, their new path. A lot of them, had left Rev and, were considering like moves to other companies or had gotten like jobs to other companies that would cause them to move across the country. Like, I realized I could be happy for them, but also be happy for the fact that that was no longer part of the next chapter of my journey. And I think it was in that moment too when I was in San Francisco where I realized I think it's time to re-explore coaching. I think it's time to give this entrepreneurial venture a go. So that's where I am now, about 3 months in. I currently consider myself a life coach, psychedelic facilitator, and sound healer. And I specifically help independent go-getters break through standstills to thrive. And I very much feel like I'm helping people like me. Like I'm helping people who used to be straight A students, excelled at school. They worked pretty intensive jobs like product management, finance, consulting, pretty much like any job within tech, and did a pretty good job, right? Like maybe they're like a senior leader, whether as an IC or a people manager, but like life goes sideways. Something happens and they're forced to reevaluate things. And for many independent go-getters, like like myself, we have this attitude of like, I can do it myself. Like I've got this. I'll just roll up my sleeves and like just work really hard and figure it out. And like you can, and I've gotten pretty far on my own, but I've gotten so much farther once I found the courage to ask for help and realize like actually I can go so much further when I work with people who know me and can support me in, uncovering certain knowledge, which is why I think I feel so drawn to plant medicine like ayahuasca, because it's very much partnering with something bigger than myself to understand myself better. So that's essentially where I'm at right now with like I guess officially post sabbatical.
And I have seen quite a few posts on LinkedIn from you about coaching and things like that. And if people wanted to reach out and be coached by you, how should they contact you?
Yeah, they can email me directly at byjennychen@gmail.com. That's BYJENNYCHEN@gmail.com.
Very cool. And how long do people usually go to coaching for? And like, what is the end goal? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's very individualized. So I work with every client to understand, what are their core challenges? What are they hoping to accomplish? And at the end of the day, I very much lead from a place of how can I help people tap into their inner truth, embody that, and thrive as a result. So very much I keep that in mind as like my overarching mission. And very much, I try not to force anyone to work with me for a certain period of time. I think at the end of the day, we all know how long something will serve us. And, when the time is up, I feel like I've noticed that in my personal and professional life that people will naturally come into and out of our lives for a reason. So the way that I work with my clients right now is we'll work together for as long as this relationship serves you. And when you're ready to leave and go on to the next step, I bid you farewell, and I just am so grateful that we had this opportunity to work together.
And do you meet with most of your clients in person or is it like via Zoom or
Yeah, that's a good question. Right now, mostly via Zoom, but especially with like the plant medicine work, I am interested in exploring kind of what in person could look like for that.
it really recalls to me like I know a doctor at the Mayo Clinic and I can't remember what substance he's doing, but he wants people to come in and take this substance and he's doing it through the Mayo Clinic, if you will.
Mm.
And it allows you to find yourself, which is very unusual and you don't expect like straight up clinical trials doing something like that. The only catch is you have to go to Rochester, Minnesota to do it. And I don't know very many people that want to go to Rochester, Minnesota, let alone Minneapolis. But
Yeah.
usually, if you're gonna go experience some of that plant medicine, you have to go to some place like that's in the Amazon or another facilitating place. One of my friends was even saying that there's a synthetic derivative of ayahuasca and it's
Mm.
completely legal in Oregon. I
I wonder if it's 5-MeO. But yeah, I think with the plant medicine work that I'm doing right now, I guess big disclaimer, I am not a medical professional and I do not provide plant medicines to my clients. But that being said, if folks are interested in like trip sitting services where I can either hold space virtually or in person, I am available. And I think through personal experience, there is something so beautiful about being with others in community, you know, and to know that there's someone by your side who can either like adjust the music for you or hold your hand if you're having a really particularly challenging trip. it's just so invaluable to be able to provide that support, and I really feel like I'm able to really do that through experience and through the kind of just person that I am, like, leading from a place of non-judgment and love and holding space for people to just be themselves fully, even if it means, like, you know, purging if they need help going to the bathroom, like, it's all part of the journey.
That's very cool, very unique. And I know that's like a large part of like the San Franciscan culture is, that peace, love, respect, trying different things, trying to find yourself. Do you feel like what you're doing, even though you're not in San Francisco, is somehow based out of that culture? Did you ever see yourself doing something like this when you were like younger in undergrad or right when you were at Dropbox starting? Or do you think it's part of the San Franciscan culture that you experienced while you were there?
That's a good question. The first time I experienced ayahuasca was when I was at Dropbox. It was about a year in, and I just realized how I just felt so stressed out. And I think in a lot of ways, like, I think I was expecting adulthood to be easier. Like I'd done so well in school, and I think I had this misconception that maybe early adulthood would kind of be like school. Someone would just tell me all the success metrics I need to hit, and as long as I, hit those metrics, then I would do a good job. So it came as a shock to me that work and life just wasn't like that. Like it was so much more difficult, and to your point, it involved, I don't know if I want to call it politics, but there is some amount of really getting to know people well, really understanding how they work, positioning yourself so that you can get a promotion, so that you seem qualified and competent. It's not just about the quantitative metrics anymore. It's about like qualitatively, how do you present yourself, and do people respect you and trust you to do good work? So when I first went to my ayahuasca retreat, I didn't feel like it was necessarily as a result of the culture of San Francisco, but rather the fact that I felt a calling. I felt a calling to go, and I felt like I couldn't ignore it. And I feel like ever since I've come to the terms with the idea like that sometimes we do get these callings in life, whenever I follow them, I haven't been led astray.
Do you ever I know personally, and so I'm asking this question from that, like,
Yeah.
for me,
Yes.
I don't have a 5-year goal. I don't have a, X year goal. I just always have like I move in a direction and when the door opens up, I walk through it. And if it doesn't open up, like I'll either keep knocking or decide to go through the window is kind of like the attitude I have. And, things just fall right into place and I don't have to like push very hard for them to happen. Is that kind of your experience with, like, a lot of life? Like, falling into Dropbox and different things like that where it was kind of, "Oh, this is obviously the way you're supposed to go. It's effortless." It kinda just happened.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I very much used to ascribe to the I need a 3 to 5 year plan. And I feel like that very much got drilled into me when I was in college, where at least the career coaches I worked with at my university, they would always have us rehearse this question. It's like, what's your 4 year, 5 year plan? And when I first joined Dropbox, or even actually, I think specifically when I joined Rev, my 5 to 10 year plan was to eventually become chief product officer or to become a COO. But then what my sabbatical taught me was that, you know, oftentimes, and I think, yeah, like what my sabbatical really taught me was that for me personally, a 5 year plan doesn't work, because when we fixate on one goal or one specific reality, then we close ourselves off to all the other possibilities and all the other lives that we could be leading. And I feel like there's something so liberating about kind of living my life similar to you now, where I very much ascribe to this philosophy of being open to everything and attached to nothing, and taking things kind of day by day, step by step, and just knowing that as long as I orient myself towards really, one, being true to myself and leading from a place of authenticity, and two, supporting people and empowering others to lead with authenticity and thrive, then I can't go wrong. Like, as long as I keep those things in mind, then I feel very confident that no matter what decision I make, no matter what path I walk down, it will be the right one for me because I'm doing I feel like I'm following in a lot of ways like my soul's purpose, like what I'm meant to do here.
And I guess that's part of the reason I never thought about it. I don't do a 5-year goal because, like, why be so attached to something and then be unhappy that you didn't hit your 5-year goal when, like, you are doing something equally as great? And who is to say that, like, the way you're leading your life 5 years down the road isn't just as good as, that 5-year goal that and I mean, who doesn't well, I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't wanna be a chief fill in the
Right.
blank. I mean,
Yes.
I would love to be a chief data officer. I've actually been a chief data officer at a startup, and it's incredibly stressful, and you have to do a lot of things, and I mean and I've seen CEOs and, like, they don't seem happy. Like, I know they have a lot of money, but, like, they're stressed out. They're, like, trying to raise rounds and, like, go through all of these things just to, have their business lift off the ground, and I don't feel called to it. But, like, they definitely make a lot of money, and I'm sure it does make people happy. It's just usually when you meet a CEO in a meeting, they always seem so frazzled, stressed out, and, like, going 100 different ways. So I don't envy them.
Yeah. I don't envy them either, and I still remember when I was working at Rev and making, like, a good six-figure salary, I felt so poor.
Mhm.
Like, I felt like, yes, I had a lot of money coming in, but I didn't feel like I had enough, and I know it's partially because I was raised in, like, a lower income household, so there was a lot of kind of this, like, scarcity mindset around money that I need to unpack and, like, work through, but I think one of the things my sabbatical taught me was that, like, you honestly it's very you don't need a lot of money to at least for me, like, I didn't need a lot of money to live a very fulfilling and happy life. Like, for me, I realized that what brings me the greatest joy is community, is surrounding myself with people that lift me up, that challenge me, that see me for who I am, and where I feel comfortable just being myself. And sometimes myself is a little sad. Sometimes she's with John, but other times she's more extroverted and really excited about life. And to be surrounded by people that like appreciate me for all parts of myself is, I think, something that is so invaluable and something I didn't really realize when I was so fixated on my job and where I made my job like all of my self worth.
And it just there's so much many other parts of life to enjoy. I know, like, personally, I was definitely very career driven up until I had my daughter. And my daughter's 6, so I've had her for a while now. And I honestly get the most joy out of being a mom, and taking care of this tiny human that, like, she can't even make peanut butter and jelly, at least not well yet. I'm sure at some point she'll be like, "Move over, mom," and
Yeah.
she won't need me as much, but right now, that gives me a lot of joy, and I can definitely relate to the low income, like, I grew up on reduced lunches and things like that, so I definitely come from that mindset as well, and even sometimes now some of my friends tease me because I still gravitate to the clearance rack even though I definitely don't have to buy things off the clearance rack, it's just I was raised that way, and that's just kind of what you
Yeah.
do. And so I can definitely relate to a lot of your experiences and a lot of the things that you're saying.
Mhm. Yeah. And I really resonate with what you said around just finding so much joy in spending time with your daughter. I mean, I'm personally curious, like, what her ratio of peanut butter to jelly is right now.
Well, she doesn't like peanut butter at all, so we only
Oh, is
w
it just jelly?
yeah, so for a while there, I was making peanut butter and jellies. We had to have a conversation, and she's like, "I do
Yeah.
not like peanut butter. I just want a piece of bread with jelly." Like, I feel like like my own mother would just like be pulling on her hair. She's like, "You need protein," and I'm like, "Well, I mean, at the end of the day, does it really matter that much that the kid doesn't have peanut butter on the peanut butter and jelly? Like, is it really going to
Yeah.
destroy the kid?" And is she not going to grow up healthy because I didn't put, anyway? So it's just like a lot of the things like you need to like learn to let go. I know some people are like, they don't let their kid put any makeup on, but my daughter sees me put some makeup on. I'm not, like, completely, like, dolled up all the way all the time, but, like, she wants to do it, and I did it. I'd take my mom's makeup and I put it on, but some people are horrified that I let, a 6-year-old have her own eyeshadow palette and smear it all over her face. I'm like,
Mm.
"She looks like a Ninja Turtle, like, where's the harm in that?" Like, because
Yeah.
half the time if you tell a kid they can't do something, that's when they wanna go do it even more. It's like, "No, you can't have any makeup at all, but watch me put makeup on," you know?
Mm.
And the second you turn your
Yeah.
back, guess what they're gonna go do? They're gonna run into your room and probably try to put makeup on.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I mean, I've noticed that for myself and my parents because growing up, they were quite strict and quite prescriptive about what we should and shouldn't
Yep,
do. And even now that I'm living with my mom, and I've been living with my mom now for a little over a year and a half, I think sometimes she forgets that I'm an adult.
yep.
Like she forgets that, I know how to make my own decisions and that I don't need her to remind me to put on a hat or like wear a jacket or wear slippers. But it's so interesting what you're saying, right? Around this like push and pull dynamic that on like that. I've also noticed this with clients as well, and why I gravitate away from like calling myself a teacher or a guru because I much prefer to just walk alongside somebody.
Mhm.
I much prefer to share my experiences and to ask people like what do they want to commit to? What action items do they want to take on this week? Because the more that we can like empower people to make their own decisions and identify what works for them and to follow their own curiosity and do what gives them joy, even if it involves smearing makeup over their face, right? Like that is going to lead to so much better, more sustainable results than you or I breathing down someone's neck and being like, you have to do this. Because I know whenever my mom told me I had to do something, I just ran in the other direction. I was like, nope, you are not telling me what to do.
I mean, I'm in my 30s and my mother informed me that I am rebellious. I'm like, I have my own place. I pay my own bills. I raise my own kid. I like do everything on my own. But at 32, I'm rebellious, and I won't give any more context than that. I obviously show up to work every day, do what do the some things, but my mother thinks I'm very rebellious. But I do want to point out one cool thing that I heard this week was when you train pilots. You don't say, "Watch out for this thing." You don't say, "Don't go do this thing," because then as soon as a pilot says, "Oh, where?" and then the plane goes towards the thing that they're supposed to watch out for, you're always supposed to
Mm,
say the direction you are supposed to go in, like, head upward. "Oh, yeah, you just narrowly missed fill in the blank," and so you
right.
always say the positive thing, like, the direction you're supposed to go in, not, "Hey, don't smear that eyeshadow all over your face," like and, not even gonna touch on the fact of, like, women and body image and all of that complexity in that
Yeah.
space, but, uh, I just thought that was really interesting about pilots, and I think that applies to more than just pilots and flying planes, if you will, but, everyday life. If you say, "Hey, watch out for this thing," then you're looking so hard at that thing that you're supposed to avoid when you should be looking, like, up and towards the thing that you're supposed to walk towards.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I really love that. And I think about how in society and especially within a professional context, similar to this idea, right, of reframing like focusing on the negatives to focusing on the positives. I feel like in work, we're constantly told to ask for feedback and ask for constructive feedback in
Mhm.
terms of where we can grow, where we can improve. That's not to say it's not important, but I feel like my perspective now and what I've seen work so effectively is helping people acknowledge and see their gifts, strengthening those, and then shoring up any areas where they, may have like weaknesses. And sometimes that involves like the most important thing is like being aware of that, so that they know that this is something that they should be looking out for. But oftentimes, like shoring it up can simply mean, hey, can I find someone who knows how to do taxes because I'm shit at math? Sometimes it's just a matter of that. And it's a matter of, also like surrounding ourselves with people who are willing to give us that feedback and just let us know, like, hey, I know you're shining in this area, but this is an area where, you're falling behind a little bit. And I'd really appreciate it if you were to do X, Y, or Z.
And asking for constructive feedback is always a good thing. It's always so hard though, even like in almost any setting to give someone constructive feedback because you'll never know how they'll receive it, especially if it's someone close to you and they're like, "Hey, what could I improve on?" Like you want to like be like, "Here's the bulleted list of things I would like you to change. I've been keeping a running tally in my head just for you." But phrasing them and couching them appropriately so you don't hurt their feelings. So it's
Yeah,
important.
yeah, absolutely. And it's so challenging, but something I remind myself of is just sometimes, like, verbally reminding them that, like, "Hey, I would love to share some feedback, and this is very much coming from a good place. This is very much coming from a place of, I want you to grow and to thrive. So would you be open to me sharing feedback?" And I think there's something about leading with that question and asking if they're ready to receive, because oftentimes we can find ourselves in situations where we know we wanna get something off our chest.
Mhm.
We're like, "Ooh, like, that happened in a meeting, I would love to tell them," but sometimes they're just not in a place to receive. And it's so important, I think, to not only be prepared to deliver feedback in a kind and loving way, but to ask whether or not that person's in a good mental and emotional place to receive what you're saying without becoming activated or triggered.
That is true, and that's a really important to the whole process. I
Mhm.
have to say, like, I'm really lucky I have a partner that openly asks me for criticism, so I don't I'm like, "Here's your tally list of" but, so I assume that means it's okay to go, but, like, you can't just go full bore of, like, "Here's everything you did wrong this last week."
Right, right, that's so true.
So, is there any other aspects that you want to share about this like whole process that you've gone through going into tech, coming out of tech, running your coaching? But I mean, a lot of the people you're probably talking with are in tech. And so your experience in tech is definitely helping them as well. So I don't think you're fully away from tech.
That's so true. I mean, you make such a good point. I think just going off of that, I think for some time when I realized product wasn't for me, I thought I wanted to just shut that door and just lock it. But then what I realized is that part of like coming home to myself and living my truth is embracing all parts of my journey, including my tech journey, because it was so important to get to where I am now.
Hmm.
And I would not be who I am, like this Jenny Chen who's openly talking about like psychedelics and like my personal journey unless I'd gone through all the trials and tribulations of, becoming a product manager, getting to the top of the organization and to let all of that go and to grieve the end of that, but then to come to terms with the fact that I am more than my title. I am more than my income. I am more than where I live is so, I think, so liberating. And I think something I would love to leave folks with is the more that you can just practice openness and going with the flow, I think the happier that you'll be because resistance to what is one of the biggest causes of suffering. And I realize that for myself. Like whenever I try to suppress or oppress like anger or sadness, then it bubbles up in some other way, and usually in a much more explosive way. And I feel like I don't know where my business is going to take me. I'm not at a point where I'm necessarily bringing in the kind of income that I was in tech, but it's still worth celebrating. And now I really enjoy each part of the journey. Like last month in February, I probably made like $600. And, that doesn't pay the bills. I'm not at a point where my mom, thank God, is not asking me to pay mortgage. I think she actually paid off her house. So there's not no more of like those bills to pay, but I feel so grateful because this is money that I earned through my clients and through leading with my truth and doing something that genuinely feels really good and true to who I am. Like when I was in tech, I just, yeah, I really felt so different, wasn't as comfortable sharing that I was imperfect, even though we all know, right? Like we all know we're all imperfect, but I think there's something now so liberating about embracing that and being like, no, I'm this imperfect human and I'm here to guide you and coach you from a place of experience, but not from a place of I'm on a pedestal and I'm greater or more than you because I feel like we all have so much to learn from each other.
And we're all on this journey until we aren't, but
Yep.
we're all on this
Yes,
journey.
exactly. Exactly.
Very cool. Well, thank you for sharing your journey into tech and out of tech and a lot of what's going on behind the scenes and um, really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me on. I'm just so grateful to have this opportunity to reconnect with you in this forum and to be able to share my story with more people.
Hi, I'm Sarah from Sarah in Tech. And I just want to give a shout out to if you want to learn more about Sarah in Tech, follow me on LinkedIn. Just look for Sarah Herberger, that's Herberger, or on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, we have Sarah in Tech as the handle. If you're looking to hear the unedited version of all of these interviews, they're available on Apple, Amazon, and Spotify. Just search for Sarah in Tech.